G'day people, I'm Sharon. Welcome to my channel. Big thanks to Susie for letting me use her Janome 744D to film again. Today I'm going to start by showing you the beginning setup for your machine. Starting at the top with your 744D, make sure you have telegraph fully extended when you're sewing. These are the tension discs, left needle, right needle, upper looper, lower looper. They should come from the manufacturer all set to 3. Stitch length and differential feed. For some reason these always confuse me, the directions they go. I usually stitch somewhere around 3. Differential feed should be set to 1 normally. Differential feed is used for specific things in sewing, and it's really important. But if you're running a normal, say, patchwork fabric through your machine and the tension is seeming odd, even though everything appears to be right, check out your differential feed. Sometimes that can make the tension look odd. Down here we have tensions for standard sewing or rolled hem. On the right hand side is the flywheel that moves the needles up and down. I can take off my thread catcher. I can open up the front of the machine. There are my instructions for threading, and down here I have a little place where I can keep a needle threader. I open the free arm. That's my free arm there on the machine. This is the dial for moving your cutter on your machine, and down here we have the place where you can raise and lower the cutter over here. I would suggest never to run overlockers or sergers with the cutter down. It's fraught with danger. You can break things and then you have to pay to have them fixed. That just slides on. Bring this up and gently in. The catcher just sits on there. As I turn this wheel, I want you to watch what's happening here. This is the blade that goes up and down and cuts the fabric as I'm doing my overlocking or serging. So as I turn that, I hope you can see that that blade is moving further and further to the right. When I turn it the other way, the blade moves in. So what's the value of that? Well, this is where you have control over how much fabric is going to be in the loops that your overlocker makes. The loops are determined by the chaining pins. They are not determined by tension. So this is a place where you can cut off more fabric if you're trying to sew something like a polar fleece, which is very big and fluffy, or cut off less fabric if you need it to fill up those loops. I'm going to start with the cutter all the way over to the left and do a bit of sewing. And now I'm going to move the cutter all the way over to the right. Get that out the way. There, and carry on. This is where I had the cutter all the way over to the left, and you'll see there is a very slight opening between the stitches and the fabric. It's not very much, but it is there. When I get over to the bit where I had the cutter all the way over to the right, there is definitely no gaps there. But if I turn this way, you can actually see it's folding that fabric. There is too much fabric to fit into the stitches. when I want to have a nice stitch, I need to be not having loops like that and not folding the fabric like this. So what are we actually aiming for here? We want the upper looper and lower looper threads to come together right at the edge of the fabric. We don't want a little bit of extra because we don't want pieces of the cut fabric flaking off and becoming lint in things. And we also don't want it to be pulling on the fabric because then we don't get a nice smooth seam. To do a rolled hem, move the cutter as far over to the right as you can. Push the cutter wheel over to the right. Now this is actually quite hard to do. There's a little bit down here I'm resting my thumb on, just on that front bit, and push it as far over as you can. You can see the cutter is actually moving out. While it's out, pull the red switch back to R. And that is the equivalent in our old machines of changing the needle plate. Over here on the right, I'm going to move this from standard to rolled hem, and that changes all the tensions. And finally, up at stitch length, I'm going to roll this down to R. And there is a rolled hem where I leave both needles in. So why am I doing a rolled hem with 2 needles instead of 1? Well, you could just do it with 1 needle, absolutely. But you have to actually take the needle out. Don't just leave it there unthreaded. It needs to be removed. I personally prefer the look of it when it's got 2 needles in the rolled hem. That's just personal preference, and nobody says that you have to do it with 1 needle. Whatever suits you. The other thing is, if you do it with only 1 needle, it's actually not got very much fabric that it's attaching to. And it can be that if you're on a fabric that is inclined towards fraying, you could do the rolled hem around an entire thing and then the whole bit just pulls off. Having 2 needles there makes it a bit firmer. To put the machine back to regular stitching, I have to do all of those things in reverse. So I'll take my stitch length back to about 3, move this from rolled hem back to standard, take this off, push it over and move that back to standard, and finally I need to move my cutter back in so that it's pretty much lining up with the line there. And we should be all back to normal. Now we're going to have a little look at differential feed. Under the foot of your overlocker, there are 2 sets of feed dogs, a front set and a back set. Differential feed is what those 2 are doing in relationship to each other. If your differential feed is set to 1, then the front set and the back set are working together. And that is why it needed to be on 1 for normal fabric and normal everything. But I'm about to show you what happens on stretch fabrics. The only thing I'm going to change on the machine this time is differential feed. I'm going to take it up to 2.2. And now I'm going to take differential feed down to 0.5. 0.5, it has stretched the fabric as it sewed it. This is a stretchy fabric, but it has been stretched by the differential feed. And this bit where it was on 2.2, it's a little bit gathered. Now this is the way that you use differential feed. If this kind of thing is happening and your fabric is being stretched, you need to tighten up your differential feed, make it a higher number to get rid of that. On the other hand, if it's gathering things, and I know this is not showing terribly well, but it is actually gathering that fabric in. If it's doing that, you need to take your differential feed lower. Essentially, when the differential feed is set to 2, the front set works twice as hard as the back set. It pulls in more fabric than it lets go out at the back. And I have done a video about gathering with an overlocker, which I will try to put up there, a connection to it. The other way, and I can't make my hands do this, when it's set down to 0.5, it will be pulling out more fabric than is coming in at the front. So it's stretching it the whole time. The place that you are most likely to find a problem with your machine stretching the fabric is when you're doing long seams. So if you're maybe doing the seam on the side of a dress or the seam on the side of a pair of trousers, particularly with stretchy things, you may find that it's getting a bit wibbly. That's when you need to pull it in, make the number a bit higher and get it back to flat. So differential feed can make an enormous difference to how your garments look. I hope you've learned something about your machine today. See you next time.